Yeah, let's see. Oh my God, I remembered my password. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Hi. Well, welcome. Welcome everyone to the first ComicsBeat happy hour, which just had a crisis because I had to log into my YouTube account and I remembered my password. So, 3 years of the pandemic haven't completely destroyed my cognitive functions. And I'm super happy to welcome Dean Haspiel, the
Hi, Heidi.
cartoonist. Hey, Dean, Emmy winner, playwright, movie maker, cartoonist, man about town, raconteur. And I said, I've been wanting to do this for a while. And, it's like a series of just chats and talks, like kind of like BarCon, just like if you were eavesdropping at BarCon, maybe with some of the names sanded off. But and I said, Dean is the person to kick this off because I said, Dean, let's parlay.
Well, we've had a tradition for many, many years, especially in the early days of the beat, of like talking like late into the wee hours, like on a Monday night or whatever, talking about what the hell ever was going on at the time, the hot topics back then, or cons or whatever,
Oh
right?
yeah, yeah. We
And
love to.
and that was when you wrote much more like robust essays, which I miss. I love when you write essays about stuff, Heidi.
Yeah.
You
There's
know,
just
you're
too
you're one of
too.
the ones that we look to, to parse what the hell is going on these days.
Well, that's very kind of you. I guess I'm just spending too much time finding out what's going on today. Keeping up with Twitter, YouTube, TikTok,
Yep.
my let's see what else, my Slack, oh yeah, my Marvel Strike Force team, so I have to go on Discord and Reddit every day to keep up with
Oh
that. It's very
Lord.
time consuming. I might be giving that up soon. So that
I
was.
I remember you once said to me, Heidi, like, Dean, you would be really good at Twitter. And I never really got into Twitter. I don't even know if I like Twitter. And I know that each platform has its thing, like between Facebook, Instagram, whatever happened to Hive. Hive came out for a minute. I could barely figure that out. Now that I think that's gone
Hmm.
because that was a reaction to Twitter. But I could never figure out Twitter. And I realize now whenever I tweet, it's like it goes into a vacuum of space. Like you kind of had to get in there in a certain sweet spot. I think. I mean, I think I missed the boat on that one. And I don't tweet enough
But
either.
I don't think it has. I always say that social media are basically like are basically like languages, and if you speak that language, then you're good at it. And I always say I should stick to the ones that I'm fluent in. So I'm good at
Mm,
Twitter, I mean, I have more
mm, mm.
followers there. I mean, I'm okay. My engagement sucks. Um, but
Well, that's
other
the
people,
key, isn't it? That's the key
yeah.
is to engage. And I don't have that much time to engage as much as I love being social. I'd rather be social in real life, to be honest, like
Well, I've
so.
said this a million times, and I do want to talk about COVID cop, but I mean, I've said this to every single person. I'm sure I've said it to you at certain points, but and I wanted to talk a little bit about 3-year anniversary of the pandemic. So talk
Mm,
about where we've
mm.
been. But my biggest takeaway is just that humans are meant to talk face to face. We are
Yes,
meant to talk in person.
right.
That's how we're designed. We're
Yeah,
designed that way. Everything. It's
yeah.
why we have senses. And like Zoom, I had so much Zoom fatigue during the
Mm.
pandemic, when that's all the contact I had. And now that I'm back doing things in person, I can like Zooming again, right?
Sure, sure. They're like this, for instance. I remember
Yeah.
walking down the street right as like when people started to feel a little like, oh, we can manage this, pandemic. And I overheard someone saying while they're on the phone, like, I wasn't meant to be in my apartment that long. Like in New York City or in big city, you live in an apartment, right? And it's a
Mm.
small space, right? You don't have a backyard or a mud room or anything like that necessarily, right? And so, like when you hang out at your home, it's usually to basically maybe watch a TV show, a movie, take a bath, and go to sleep, right? Maybe cook some food, but you're not hanging out there all day long,
Right.
especially with the amount of stuff that a lot of us accrue, or if you have pets like cats or dogs or whatever, like, and that's why you live in a big city is to use the big city as your living room in a lot of ways. So it did occur to me like, wow, we really were trapped in smaller spaces where in other parts of the country you had like acres of land and you
Mhm.
could breathe around each other, and wonder what's going on with this pandemic thing. That's why there were a lot of questions about it, and they still are. Um, but yeah, I feel like part of COVID Cop was a response somewhat to this, because I had done this anthology called Pandemics, right? That was co-curated and co-edited by my studio mate Whitney Matheson. And the initial idea was, I was in a studio of about 12 to 14 people, right? There were like 12 art tables in this giant studio with windows. It was an awesome space.
The
But when
dream, the dream.
the dream, right? And in Gowanus, Brooklyn,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And when the lockdown happened, we were told we couldn't really leave our houses or whatever. I kept going out on my bike, and it was really eerie. It was almost like I Am Legend. It was like I was waiting to see if there was a human being or a zombie or something, and it was always empty. The streets were empty. It was
Mhm.
crazy. So I'd bike over to my studio, to basically a building that was three floors tall, and no one was in it. And I
Mhm.
was in a giant room where I'm at my little art table, my little corner, trying to honor and respect everyone else's space and not touch anything, because you didn't know if you were going to get it. You had no idea back then, right? But I was trying to finish the final season of the Red Hook for Webtoon, because I still had a job. You remember when Marvel and DC said pencils down? I mean, what the
Yeah,
hell,
I
right?
know.
Well, my
This is,
pencil didn't go down,
yeah.
like, so. But during that time, I had this idea of like, well, maybe, we all have little stories. I had done this for 9/11, when 9/11 happened, and Jeff Mason published that 9/11 anthology, and there were all those other anthologies that came out. And you kind of write what you know or how you feel. A lot of people in the world don't have the tools to necessarily express themselves creatively, and I feel like sometimes that's our job as artists, is to, like, create that baseball cap that you might wear at the Yankee game to root for your team, but in this case it's for trauma,
Right.
like through comics.
Yeah.
um anyway, so I wrote this little story of a Red Hook story that honored, remember at 7 p.m. when the clap would happen, and I
Mm,
wanted to tell that story and put that in comics form,
right. Oh
and
my
we all
God,
did that.
those innocent days.
I know,
Those
right? And our
innocent
and our heroes were the
days.
first responders. They were delivery
Wow.
people. They were the
Wow.
nurses. They were, so I want to honor that and talk about that. But then another part of my brain was trying to scratch a certain itch, because the other thing that comics do is create kind of messed up anti-heroes, like a
Mm,
Judge Dredd, a Toxic Avenger, martial law, Mar from Sin City. I mean, I love those characters, right?
mm.
So I came up with this idea called COVID Cop. I wrote up the script and I sent it off to some publishers. And the response was, "This is really good. We can never publish this." And I
Now,
was like, "Why?"
why?
They're
Why?
like, "Look at the title alone." And the word COVID was still, and it's still
Right.
synonymous with death,
Right.
or getting something that we don't know what it is. I mean, we talk about that all the time, right?
Hmm.
We still right now don't know how it's ultimately going to affect us, each individual. So, but I was leaning in on the idea of this cop that had COVID, and I came up with a storyline, and I got rejected, and then I put it to the side and I did other stuff. Okay. And then it wasn't until about 3 months ago, when I didn't have any work ahead of me, that I decided to double down, draw what I had written, and then spark a Kickstarter and see what happens. And I'm telling you, I had no idea what the response was going to be. And because it had to be called COVID
Right.
Cop, I
Right.
came up with other names. It just didn't work, like Zealot Patrol. I'm like, what the hell is that? Like, that doesn't say what this is. And in
Right.
the tradition of like 1980s heavy metal and 2000 AD, I want to lean into this because it's what we do best, right? And if it offends some people, sorry, maybe that's part of the charm. I don't know.
What
So
do you,
I came up with the story, and part of the story is that, and I sometimes believe this a little bit myself, is that we never found a cure. There was no way out. And ultimately, the government decides, you know what? The worst thing to happen to planet Earth is mankind. So let it run its course. But instead of cops saving people, cops are going to like make sure people get infected, and and society and humanity will just die out. Okay, and save Earth in that way,
my
right?
God. Wow.
But our guy, COVID cop, finds another way. He figures something out. And it's something that I do. This is a little autobio. Is I know a lot of people don't like to drink the water near the Gowanus Canal because it's got syphilis in it and like the dead bodies and gangsters and, you know, jaws and license plates and everything else, right? Like, so I tend to only drink Gowanus water from the tap because I feel like it creates an immunity in me that makes me stronger,
Oh
right?
boy.
So, so I kind of took the idea that even though we're not really drinking Gowanus water, we're drinking water from the Catskills watershed, I believe. But still, I know too many people that buy water or will filter water, and that's fair. I don't have that kind of budget in my life, you know. But so I
Well,
drink the
filter the
water.
water, you know, get a Brita, but sure.
I should get a Brita. Okay. Maybe that'll be a little gift if anybody's listening out there. And then I decided that that was where he got his powers from, our guy, you know, from this canal. And but he literally is drinking from the canal. That's famously awful. Okay, just look it up. And it's right by it takes place at Smith and Ninth Street in Brooklyn, and it actually is right by the tallest, it's in the Guinness Book of World Records, the tallest elevated train station in the
Oh, right,
world.
right. Yes,
the
yes. I've been there many times. Just in case anyone isn't a native New Yorker or grew up in the tri-state area like myself, and your Dean is a native New Yorker. But you know, back in the, you know, the day when I was a kid, like the 70s or 80s, like the evening news would show the Gowanus Canal just with poop floating in it. Right? Like poops. Like literally raw, they used to just pump raw sewage into the Gowanus Canal.
It's awful. It's
And
awful.
you know, that's how bad it was. And I mean, they've cleaned it up, but you know, can you ever really clean up that much poop? I don't know.
I mean, it's also known as the Gowanus, Gowanus Canal. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just wrong, you know. So that inspired me, just like other parts of Brooklyn have inspired some of my work, you know, a la the Red Hook.
Well,
And
you're
then
like,
and then
you know, you just, you know, Alan Moore can't leave Northampton. Like all of his work is about Northampton. And, you know, like Brooklyn is your Northampton. You are the Alan Moore of Brooklyn,
oh, I
of
love
Red
it.
Hook, the
Thank
Alan
you.
Moore of Red Hook.
I love it. I love it. It's funny because I grew up in Upper West Side of Manhattan, and it wasn't until I moved 25 years ago to Brooklyn that I became a semi-comics ambassador of sorts, you know. And I think it's because it was the first, I remember first moving to Carroll Gardens, and I heard quiet for the first time, and it was loud. You know, like it was bizarre. Like suddenly I could hear my thoughts because the white noise of Manhattan was kind of gone, you know. And I think I was able to access more creativity in that way, you know. Plus, there's such tradition and history, as is in all of New York City, but in particular Brooklyn. You know, actually, Red Hook is where Steve Rogers was born, and then would
That's
later
right.
become Captain America,
That's
right?
right. And I
So,
believe, I mean, you know, there's a lot of Revolutionary War history around in the rivers
Fort
of New York.
Defiance in Red Hook.
There was, yeah, there was forts, there
Hmm.
was battles. I mean, I live in
Yep,
Kips Bay. There was a
yep,
battle of Kips Bay that George
that's right.
Washington sat on a hill up
Right.
the river observing from his post. I guess it's where Gracie Mansion is now, but
Yep. And I
yeah.
remember 25 years ago, if you were gonna, like, I had some friends who would move to Brooklyn on Bergen Street, and once a blue moon, they'd throw a party on their roof, which was always fun because you didn't do that really in Manhattan too much. And I remember hopping into a cab. Oh, before I would hop into a cab, I'd wave them down. They'd ask, "Where are you going?" And if I said Brooklyn, they would just speed off. And I was like, I remember the trick was to get in the car, lock the door, and then tell them where you were going. And then they kind of had to take you there, unless they were a real jerk and would just say, "No, I'm not going to Brooklyn," or they would try to charge you more. It was weird. And now
Right.
Brooklyn is where a lot of
Oh
people from Manhattan made an exodus,
my
and it's more
God.
expensive than Manhattan.
I mean, I was just walking down Union Street and I was just actually in Carroll Gardens on Saturday
Right.
walking in Gowanus. I was just in Gowanus having Mexican
Mm-hmm.
food with my friends on Third Avenue, which we never would have
Mm-hmm.
done, right? Just walking down Union Street. And I'm like, oh my God, this is like Paris. I mean,
I
and it
know.
was considered a neighborhood when
Oh yeah.
when I
Oh
moved
yeah.
here. Like it's
Oh
just
yeah.
insane how people don't see what's right in front of them, right?
Yeah.
You know,
But
because of
also, I
what's
think,
cool or what's hip.
and that was part of my response when I created the Red Hook, because in the Red Hook story, and I guess there was a little bit of a kinship between COVID Cop and the Red Hook. I don't know if I'll ever make that actual but like, gentrification, maybe I'm part of the problem as well. But then we come in as artists and we go to crappy industrial neighborhoods. We make it kind of cool with our art scene. And then investors come in and then want to redevelop it because people are now coming to those spots. I mean, I think Bed-Stuy is probably the last vestige
Yeah.
of
Yeah, I call it
art.
the kale trail. If you
Oh,
go somewhere and you go to the, some dangerous looking neighborhood and you go into the bar and they're serving kale salad, that's
uh-huh.
been gentrified.
It's been totally, totally. So, and then I was like, when I ran out of like ideas of who could maybe publish this story, I was like, well, I mean, I've done my own web comics in the past through Activate and other relationships, and I was like, that's kind of like self-publishing, although it doesn't involve print and distribution, And then I
So
was like, well, let me bite the bullet.
So let me just ask you, and I want you to riff for a minute because this being
Yeah,
our first live stream, I have to jump up and fix something in my recording rig here.
yeah, of course.
So Dean, like, what was your thoughts about Kickstarter prior to this? What was your experience or connection with Kickstarter prior to this?
My connection was to be a backer, often. And what I did was when I realized when I started my own Kickstarter, I discovered that I had backed approximately 80 projects over the years. And I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. I didn't realize that. So in a way, you become, we're all investors in each other's projects. We're there at the ground up. And I think that's a really great idea. And I've backed all kinds of different projects, not just comics. But when I realized now, when I decided to spark this in like January, knowing it would launch in March, I realized that there's Marvel, there's DC, and they're considered the big two. And then Image often is now listed as the third biggest publisher. But I almost wonder, is Kickstarter the third biggest
Oh, I
publisher?
mean, I think you could, I think somebody did run that number and it did come out as, the top 10 publishers. Absolutely.
I mean,
I'm
absolutely in
not sure
there,
if it's the
right?
third. Yeah. I'm not sure if it's the third, fourth, fifth, or, if DC's the second anymore, given
I
what's
know,
been
right?
going on there. Yeah.
Because honestly, I mean, I still read some DC and Marvel comics, but I wonder who reads those comics when actually, if you want to read the next Marvel comic, you just turn on Disney Plus, basically, it's become
Right.
more like television, and I believe DC is going to go that route more so as well. And so what I discovered was that Kickstarter is its own ecosystem, and it actually has nothing to do with Marvel and DC, or that whole old school. Like I grew up picking up comic books from my newsstand across the street, and then the comic shop was created, and of course there were other people who bought their comics at 7-Eleven and other kind of pharmacies and whatnot. But then it became a whole, and then conventions and so on and so forth, right? But honestly, I feel like Kickstarter comics or crowdfunding comics, let's call them, because there's the other platforms as well, is its own ecosystem.
Oh,
It's not
absolutely.
competing at all with the Spider-Man and Superman and all that, at all. And I think in a lot of ways, what's cool about crowdfunding and what I do as well for other people is you're supporting someone you like, and
Yeah.
so the nervous thing that you do when you spark a Kickstarter is you're like, does anybody like me? Like, were they gonna like my idea? Is it affordable? Can I create the project? And in this case, I knew that by the end of the Kickstarter, I have like 10 more days. I've already drawn it. I was talking to Josh Neufeld, my old pal Josh Neufeld today, which I published a little article about how we made comics in high school.
Mm.
I was talking about he's going to help design my book because he understands InDesign. He knows how to talk to the printer, and what kind of, is it matte finish or gloss or whatever, all those things. We've done other projects together like that, so I'm leaning on him. I leaned on Whitney Matheson to help me come up with to make sure that all the words make sense, or like some ideas actually for the Kickstarter, like the COVID Cabana, which is going to be like an online little party.
But
Or
there you go. That's the community building.
yes,
The
community
community
building,
building. I mean, crowdfunding is all about the crowd and it's all about the community. And
right? And I was aware of that in
Mhm,
2006 when with LiveJournal. On
mhm,
LiveJournal, when I had
right.
and it's still my website. If you go to at LiveJournal, that's or deanhaspiel.com. It's the same thing, right? So I've kept that because I liked the communal aspect, and that's where Activate derived from, was the fact that I noticed other cartoonists were posting images of their works. And I was like, well, why don't we do free webcomics and create like a collective, you know, because it was community based. If you came from me, that's cool, but you might stay for 6 other cartoonists because everyone had a day, right? 7 days
Right.
of the week. And vice versa. Someone comes from someone else, they might learn about my work, and that's that kind of communal thing that happens, you know. And the same thing is on Kickstarter. I'll notice, like, I'll get like an alert from someone, and suddenly I see that my project has been listed. And that was another thing. I met Oriana, who works at
Yeah.
Kickstarter,
So
at
yeah,
Mocha last year.
yeah, now let me just, Oriana is Oriana Leckert is the
Yeah,
comics lead at Kickstarter. Now she's leaving that and they're hiring somebody for that position, which is, if my email is to be trusted, is the most highly sought after position in comics. As I
I
always get
bet.
people like, how do I get this? Or can you write me a letter or something like that? But Oriana, I saw her at Emerald City a couple weeks ago and was hanging out. She's great. And she, like, part of Kickstarter is that they understand it's community building and it is itself a community. So how was that process? How you met Oriana at
So
Mocha last
I met
year?
Oriana, and I knew in the back of my mind that I needed to test the water someday, because one of the things that I talk about to other cartoonists is, if you're going to create your own stuff, you're not just, be a custodian for, in my case, like the Fox, what I did a bunch of issues of with Archie. But that I don't dictate those terms. They let me know if they want me to do more, or they invite me, and if I'm free and open, then I can do it. But I'm not sitting here with my monthly Batman or Spider-Man book. I don't have that, right?
Right.
So because I'm a creator that comes up with like ideas, and listen, I had a good run with the Red Hook at Webtoon for over 5 years, right? I had this
5 years. Wow.
5 or 6 years that I got
Wow.
paid to write and draw something I own.
Right.
That's insane.
Yeah.
The autonomy right there is hard to come back from, right?
Yeah.
As much as I love playing with the toys being DC, Marvel, Archie, whatever, right? So because I'm not like the Kurt Swan or the Jim Aparo of comics, where I get to do my monthly book, or even the Jack Kirby, my favorite creator. I do think about, well, how do we create and publish and own and distribute on our own, right? And there are these tools. I listen, when people ask me, hey Dean, I want to be a cartoonist, give me some advice. I was like, it's on your phone. You're holding the device. You just make a web comic, commit to it, show up at least once a week, see what happens, like start there. You don't need to spend that much money. You need to spend your time and employ your commitment, to this. And I think that that's what's key and important as well. And also, don't just talk about yourself. That's the part of the community that is also important. It's like, talk about other people, other creators, and share their projects, because
Right.
you're curating a sensibility of who you are. And that's another thing. Just like your favorite music, movies, whatever, the same thing with art and comics and project and people, right? So I think that's also really important. And with Oriana, I knew in the back of my mind that I might be contacting her someday. And I had her card in my wallet. I don't have a lot of cards in my wallet. And then
It's the
finally I was
right
like, all
one to
right,
keep, Dean, for sure.
it's one to keep, right? And I emailed her, and immediately she remembered me. She was like, your project sounds really cool. We're going to give it some love. And I was like, thank you, thank you, thank you. And then, of course, I was also seeking advice. Like, what are the tiers? What am I trying to sell here? Besides a comic book, right? And ultimately, I decided I'm selling a comic book. I look at a lot of other Kickstarters, and I respect them for the amount of merchandise that they add, maybe for other levels and stuff like that. But it starts to become a deluge of stuff that I don't necessarily need or want. I just want the comic book. At least that's where I'm coming from, right? So what I wanted to do was to obviously have an electronic version of it for people who don't need to have more print in their house, or because I'm only shipping in America, I wanted to make it available to people all around the world, because it just becomes too expensive. to try to ship outside of
Right,
America.
right. And yeah, shipping has become one of the big pitfalls in crowdfunding. And it's why so many kind of like, Kickstarter agencies have sprung up that help creators with that kind of stuff, help
Like
them with the back
Zoop
end.
and
Yeah, like
other
Zoop.
places, which I
Sure.
might
Back,
talk to,
yeah,
in the future.
Zoop, Backer Kit, Crowdfunder, that's another
Right,
one that's sprung up. And
right,
and then there's individuals I'm not want to name anymore because I'll
right.
leave somebody out. But yeah, there's a
Well,
whole
also,
bunch of
and to be honest, publishers,
yeah.
a lot of indie publishers are
Hmm.
kickstarting their projects. Like Rocket Ship, Tom Akel, he kickstarts
Hmm.
every project.
Right,
And at
right.
first, years ago, when I first saw that, I went, "Wait a second, why don't I just kickstart? Why do you, But it's because they do a lot of the heavy lifting,
Hmm.
and they have relationships with distribution. My comic book Cova Cop is not going to be in a comic shop unless I talk to like my pals at JHU Comics, Forbidden Planet, or Anyone Comics, and then I might unload like 10 copies and then just see how it does. But then you're cutting your price tag in half.
Now, right now, how many pages is I'm going to show? I'm going to
Yeah,
attempt to
show a couple
share my
things.
screen and show some art. But how many pages is
The Cova
COVID
Cop
Cup?
story, the first issue, is 24 pages. This what you're looking at right now. This, if we reach 15,000, that's going to be the Cova Cop church key, which is a can and bottle opener.
Oh, I
We'll see
want
what happens.
that. I want that. Yeah.
And then other things you're going to look at here, which I
Yeah. Let's
picked
see what
one.
else we have here.
So we just have like a little square that I use on Instagram just so
Yeah.
people can see what COVID Cup looks like. This is going to be, if you do the booster shot level, this will be, and I have a whole pack of these. I don't know if you can see my little screen, but I have a ton of like cardboard. These are mostly from Fancy Feast cat food that my neighbor Ellen Chews often gives me, and I also have my own because I have cats as well. Or it comes from Chinese food takeout, you know. And I love drawing on this. And so the booster shot is going to be an original drawing with your name on it.
On a
It's
fancy
so cute.
feast. Wow. I mean, I get fancy feast for my cats too. That was a whole thing,
Oh,
like there was
please
this fancy.
hold those cardboard
Okay, well, yeah.
for
I
me.
mean, there was a horrible fancy feast shortage last year that
I
really
remember that.
upset Charlie,
I
to
remember
the
that.
point where he peed on my bed. So now to know that these cardboard inserts are also being repurposed,
Yes.
that's
Yes.
genius.
Thank you. I
It is
mean,
also genius that we all know what the fancy feast inserts are because our cats love the
that,
damn fancy feast, which is
yeah,
crack, by the way. It's like
it's
McDonald's. It's like they
it's
won't eat
totally
good food.
crack.
They'll only eat like, crappy Big Macs for
And
cats.
I just, speaking of McDonald's, I just heard this morning on New York One News that since the pandemic, about 2 or 3 years now, right? McDonald's prices have gone up 28%. Like everything's getting too expensive.
Yeah.
So like if I can draw a neat looking COVID cop with your name on it, I don't feel bad doing it on cardboard. It's art, right? It's cool.
No,
And that's
I
the other
mean,
thing. When you're asking me how many pages this comic is, it's 24 pages plus cover, right?
mhm.
And I know that for some people, they're gonna be like, wait, you're charging $15 for the print version of this plus shipping and handling? I was like, yeah, because this is not a Marvel and DC comic. This is a Kickstarter comic. And I understand and respect for some people that think, well, but I pay $4 or $5 for a 24-page comic. Yeah, that's because they have a different ecosystem. They have a different relationship with printers and distribution, and they sell a whole lot more. When I did my initial goal of 5,000 and I was able to get that in 3 days, I was blown away by that, right? I was like, oh, that, by the way, that's COVID cop drinking some of that Gowanus
Oh
water,
yeah, there
get
you
that
go.
immunity, you know? Um, but I was just like, I'm glad that I'm able to. So there are people in a crowdfunding that get paid first, and that's usually a printer, the people who make the merchandise, right? And have to multiply and duplicate these things. There's the U.S. mail. No one's giving you a break, right? So what I'm trying to do, if I can raise more funds, is to be able to pay the creator for investing their 3 months of and hemorrhaging their bank account. Now,
Right.
yes, I get it. It's a gamble, it's a risk, but so is everything, right? But
Mhm.
that's part of it. So I don't feel bad asking for $15 for a comic book, that
Mhm.
honestly is coming from me to your doorstep, you know? And I don't know, I feel like you have to be able to value yourself. You have to know your value, you know.
Mhm. Well,
And for some people it's
you got to
tough.
bet
I
on
get it.
yourself. Always bet on yourself.
You got
Always
it.
bet on yourself.
And I'm walking that dog. I'm doing it. Like, this is all done now. I wasn't
Yeah.
waiting for money to then go write and draw. And I get that. I respect that that's a system too, you know,
But
because
let me just jump in here. I mean, I know if
yeah,
you work with Oriana, and I mean, I know you talk to some other veteran crowdfunders, and I mean,
right.
they help you out with like what the levels are and what the,
Yes.
you know,
Yeah,
like,
they check it out. They go, okay, that
yeah.
makes sense for what you're doing. And like I had other offers, like
Hmm.
obviously, you know, I just came back after 3 weeks of being at the Atlantic Center for the Arts, where I mentored comics to 6 associate artists, right? And to me, I love doing that. And so I extended that in my Kickstarter to be able to mentor, you know, whether you're a rookie or a veteran, or you just want to brush up on something and talk for an hour and just get my undivided attention and give you, you know, impart some kind of my wisdom and my experience with story clarity and narrative. You know, that's ultimately what I care about when I'm
Right.
talking to other cartoonists is, are you able to convey your idea, you know, dramatically, funny, whatever, you know, that and to be able to steep in that and to help them fully realize their ideas.
Right, right. Well, that's the best part. It's the best
Yeah.
part is I I wouldn't even say collaborating because that could be the worst part.
Yeah,
But the
it
best,
can.
right? But the
Yeah.
best part is just maybe just, you know, kicking some ideas around and helping people, or, you know,
You
like
never know.
making
The
a
minute
connection. I love that when somebody is like, Heidi, do you know someone who can blah blah? And I was like, yeah, talk to Bleebly. And then it's like, bam, all of a sudden it's all connected.
Yep.
I mean, that's my favorite thing in the world is being able to help make connections like that.
Well, and thank you. And actually, weirdly enough, without giving away, the ultimate thesis of this COVID cop story is exactly about that. It's thinking a different way, you know, because as creators, and the same thing going back to Jack Kirby, he, except he's the guy who dared to ask what was God and then dared to answer it, right? Like, what is
Mm,
God? Like, but like most artists, what we do is ask questions. We don't necessarily have answers. And I think that everyone is always asking questions. If you're, you know, engaged human being, you're always wondering, right? And even if you just go for a walk in the woods, you never know what that's going to do. A lot of my ideas come in the shower, washing dishes. Water has a lot to do with my creativity. I don't know
mhm.
why.
Well, it's the negative ions, so they say, you
Oh, is
know.
that what?
Oh yeah, that's why people like water, being near the water. That's why people love fountains. Is because supposedly if the water creates negative ions that soak up the positive ions. Positive ions make people angry and stressed out. So
Oh,
that's why being around, it's one theory. You know, I
you're
had,
giving me an idea for a character in
well,
COVID Cop.
I had a little cat fountain. Speaking of cats, which just keeps running through this conversation, but I had a little cat fountain and would tinkle all night. And I think that was a peaceful thing in my house. And certainly Charlie
Yeah,
liked it and
yeah.
Lucy liked it. And now it's broken. So I got to get a new one. But I'm
You got to
actually
get a new one.
I'm looking forward to having the little tinkle in
Oh yeah,
my home again. But
that
yeah,
background
water.
white noise tinkle, right?
Right,
Yeah.
the right noise, cat tinkle, yes. And but yeah, but that is why, I mean, that's one theory why water is important to our creative processes, or peaceful, or why we like it. And I'm sure there's lots of well, we have comments. I want to thank everybody who's watching this live and commenting out there. And a couple of them, I'm going to just read them. Our good friend Bob Fingerman says that raw sewage was the freshest thing in the Gowanus. Yes, absolutely. And that we all love where we moved to more than where we moved from. And he liked the Upper West
Ah.
Side, and good for you. It is beautiful there. And then our good buddy Joseph Village says facts on ideas coming to you. Shower. He's another shower thinker. And Art in Chaos, who I'm not sure what your real name is, but
Oh,
true.
that's Jen Ferguson.
Oh, hi, Jen Ferguson. She adds that true making your own projects is crucial.
Yep, yep.
Yeah. So now what's this crazy thing, Dean?
So one of the things that the story talks about is in terms of opening up, you said ions or whatever, negative and positive. One of the things that the government has done is weaponize our traditions and turned our holidays into horror to try to traumatize what's left of humanity. So there's like a bad Santa in there, right?
Mm,
In this case, we have a military guy. His name is Major Fallout. and he is wearing an Easter Bunny mask, but he's with a chainsaw. So he's doing his job of kind of like trying to eliminate the rest of humanity and coming up against COVID Cop and his ex-wife, whose name is Fate Majeure. And yeah, it's a lot of to think about.
Yeah.
But or don't think about it, just let it slide, right? And we got this guy wearing this bunny mask. He's trying to take away basically the innocence of these holidays, you know, that we grew up with, and the last vestiges of what we like and hope for, you know, our holiday heroes as it is. So this is basically a picture from one of the panels in the comic, like a raw image. And I think there's another one
Yeah.
above
Yeah, we have a
this
couple here.
guy. This guy's punching out our hero, Fate Majeure, after she's grabbed the chainsaw and has cut off some of his arms.
Nice
And
dry brush technique there, Dean.
thank you very much. Thank you.
This was all done by hand or
So
computer?
this is all done by hand. Like all the
Wow.
line art is you know Bristol board, or in this case might even be sketch paper with blue pencil and a couple of micron pens just to get the little straight lines, and then a Kurotaki brush pen just to get the sexy brush lines.
Yes, yes.
So,
Well, it looks fantastic.
thank you.
I am going to stop sharing. Woof. I did
So let
it.
me ask you, Heidi, like, because we're just talking about my singular Kickstarter, and I appreciate that. But for the Beat, is there anything you're looking for in Kickstarters, or what's been your experience?
So, okay. So, and this is since our patrons, this video is going live to our patrons. And, you know, if you're watching this later on YouTube, where it will be posted, you know, please join up. You can join for $1, $2. You know, we like $5, a cup of coffee, but please join up because we are talking about, so we're going to do it. Of course, it's a little delayed because everything's a little delayed, but we are going to do like a Beat annual as a PDF. And I've started traveling again for cons, so that's kind of put it back. But I'm going to be working on it with Dean Simons, who I don't know if he's watching this or not, but the other Dean. And but he puts together a lot of he's done kind of publishing in the past, so he's going to help me put it together. So we're going to do it as a PDF first, and then once we do that, just, you know, test out how it works, then I think we're going to do a Kickstarter for a printed edition.
Well, let me ask you, what's in the annual? What is the annual?
So the annual is going to be just stuff that we've already run. Like it's going to be kind of like
Like
you know,
a best of?
like a best of, like we did like the best comics of the decade for the
Right.
teens, and I thought that was just a fantastic, you know, we had the whole crew worked on that, and I thought it was a really fantastic list. There's some other best, we're going to do our other best of lists. I think we have some interviews that we're going to run the major. I also have 2 panels that I did last year, one at San Diego, one at New York, that were like the future of comics. That was some really great lineups, so I'm going to get those transcribed and put in there. And, you know, that's a bam. I think you got 64 pages. So
easily. I mean, that in a way, I miss like the Comics Journal, you know, like that when it was regular. Now it's like an annual affair, maybe, or I don't even know if they do it anymore. You know?
Oh my God, I
mean, there's the website, of course, but there was something about holding that magazine and or the Comics Buyer's Guide or any of those things,
but,
you know, like.
But let me ask you, and you know, I'm not undercutting my own thing, because, you know, like when we do the print edition, we're going to do all new. We're going to do new content. You know, we're going to kickstart it so we have money, so we can pay the contributors, you know, pay for the designer, and, you know, put a cool cover and all that stuff. And we're, you know, we're going to blow it out with some really fun material and, you know, secret stuff from the, I mean, I have thousands and thousands of photos from over the years, you know, thousands, and of digital photos. And I even have some old school film photos from back of my San Diego days. So, you know, and just in my apartment, which you can't see because it's so messy, I have a rich treasure trove of material.
Didn't Jackie Estrada, she came out with 2 books from her San Diego pictures?
She did, and it's really funny because her, you know, I'm in a few of them, and I'm on the cover of one of her books, and she, like, her photos are very rough. I'm not say rough, they're they're very candid, very
Very
candid. And,
candid. Yes, that's the word.
sometimes I was like, oh, these are just snapshots. And then I read that Jackie had said she had studied photography and that was the school that she was working in, was
Yeah,
just
yeah, yeah.
candid snapshots, but just trying to catch the truth of the moment. And,
Right.
she really did. Like, she really did catch, when you look at those old photos of Jack Kirby with his, pants up to here, and,
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Can't
just,
Photoshop that out.
oh God, it's just, and so these old cartoonists with their lapels, their lapels out to here, it's just
Mhm,
in their leisure suits. It's
mhm,
just so
mhm.
extraordinary.
Yeah.
So yeah, so mine, I don't know what I'm gonna find when I really go back and dig in the archives
I
of
mean, you
mine.
could literally, but you could do a picture book alone just with captions. Honestly, that I think would be amazing.
Well,
That's a,
again, I'm trying to dry run what I'm
right,
doing with the beat. So
right,
and just to kind of, give my own
right,
story of year 3 of the pandemic, which we're in the post-pandemic era, no
right,
question about it. I don't see
right.
anybody I don't see anybody wearing a mask on the subway except me anymore.
I wear a
I
mask on the subway. I wore a mask on the airplane to Florida, and I was the
oh
only one.
I just do it. I have never tested positive for COVID. I have been
Oh,
exposed to it many, many, many times, knock wood, and I've never tested positive. So I'm going to continue doing what I do.
right.
That's, I might look stupid and they're going to think I'm some kind of crazy
Who cares?
um
Who cares?
hypochondriac, which I'm not, by the way. I am not a germaphobe at all. I have never
Mhm.
been a germaphobe. I didn't even wear house shoes till somebody told me about it. I was like, oh, I guess that makes sense. But yeah.
Well, like
So
Mr. Rogers.
well, anyway, but
I love Mr. Rogers.
yes, I do too. So anyway, so my 2023 was starting out, and I just said, I need to somebody very wise as Alette Stillwell at Hiveworks, which is the webcomics, that told me you need to get your back end fixed before you do anything. And I was
Mm,
like, you know what? I need to get my back end fixed before I do anything. So I
mm.
spent, I've been running the Beat as a website for I guess it went solo maybe 2015, 2016. So that's 17 years.
Wow.
And more or less, um, no, you know what? It started in 2014. So this will be next year will
Eighth.
be the 20-year anniversary.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, and
And I remember when you were talking about to do it,
mhm,
again,
yeah,
those late night conversations.
yep, those late night
Oh
conversations.
my Lord. I
So, it's been on a couple different platforms, but I've managed to transfer most of the content of 20 years. And, people tell me, oh, it's normal to have a WordPress table that large. And I'm like,
mm,
it's normal, but it's not typical. So the
right,
back end is, it's the website infrastructure is like any other infrastructure. If you don't fix it, if you don't maintain it,
right,
if you don't
right.
update it, upgrade it,
Hmm,
it falls apart. Of course, we've had
hmm,
many flame out outages, and it's actually more stable than it's ever been right now. But there's just all these things. I took me the entire month of January where I just was really focused
hmm,
on updating all the software, and then other things would fail, and then I'd have to
hmm,
so it was a long process. It was really
hmm.
fun. I was so happy just to be, I mean, I'm not a coder, but just, doing web dev again, because
No,
it's
yeah, I
so
mean, hey,
easy. Yeah,
God bless you.
people don't yell at you for it, unlike, writing things on the internet or Twitter. So I guess that's
Right,
maybe why I enjoyed it so
right,
much. And, getting part of this was getting more financially stable for the Beat.
right.
And
Absolutely.
we're not completely financially stable, but we've taken major, major steps. And I want to again thank our patrons, our
Patrons.
Patreons. We've doubled the number of patrons we have. We've doubled the amount of money we've made. We've
That's great.
and everybody's been so patient with all the things that we've said we were going to do, and it's taking a while, but everybody's been so patient, supportive, and that means the world to us. So yeah, so then doing this annual is like one of the ideas. So we have that
Right,
scoop. This is a scoop.
great.
We're also working on a potential Kickstarter for a series of short documentaries about the
Oh,
history of comics. Yes, yes. I
ooh,
can't say another word, but yes.
nice.
And so for me, I'm sure it's for you. I quote Scott McCloud all the time. It
Right.
takes 5 minutes to come up with a great idea for a comic book. It takes a lot longer than 5 minutes to make a great comic book. So,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
you and I can sit and spitball all night and plan the
Right.
next 10 years of our lives, really.
Right.
You
We
know,
can. Did you watch the Oscars?
of course, yes.
Now remember when what do they call the not the Johnson brothers. What were they called? The guys who did
The
everything everywhere.
Daniels.
The Daniels, sorry. Um, and one thing that the Asian dude said that I thought was so spot on. He was like, in a world today where everything is just happening in real time, like on Instagram and social media, and you're getting all your stories that way. Like they need to take like 3 years to make a movie and still be somewhat relevant or something. And that's a different time, obviously, to make
Mm.
that stuff. So even when I'm doing like a COVID cop or whatever the next thing I might do, is like, will it be relevant when it's finally, I'm able to show it at the time,
But
and it's
I wanted to ask you though. I mean, I think it's really interesting in that, like you said, people wouldn't publish it because it was called COVID. And, obviously, I think Glass Onion was the first mainstream major piece of fiction or work that I'd seen that actually addressed the pandemic, that took place
mm,
in pandemic times
right,
and addressed it and had, like in jokes about the pandemic.
right,
And like, our art is, we have been so busy experiencing this and living
right.
through it and learning from it that our, like I haven't seen very much. I guess Bo Burnham Inside, that was something that a lot of people told me was, a major touch point for them. And
Mm,
I didn't watch it at the time. And I think if I'd been stuck at home and watched it, it would have had more
mm.
impact for me. Because I
I've seen
started to
some
watch it.
short documentary films about,
Mhm.
the pandemic and things that can be again when you can do more immediate kind of
Mhm.
creativity, but when you're really trying to put something together and it takes time and you're trying to I always equate it like this, like there's the headlines that we see all day long, breaking news, and you get a headline and maybe you read the first or two sentences inside an article and then
Mhm.
that's it, and they still don't know what the hell's happening. But a magazine or like The Nation will like take a month or two to write what the hell happened in that story, and they're able
Mm.
to investigate and figure out like what it takes, and those are the two types of storytelling, today is the
Mhm.
immediate reaction, the knee-jerk reaction, where we're all outraged and freaking out or whatever, or you're having your gut feeling of, versus the one that kind of nuances the story and gives us some time to think about and maybe tell some jokes and bring some levity to serious
Yeah.
topics because
Yeah.
we need that.
Right. Yeah. Tamar, our listener, says that the TV series Superstore incorporated the pandemic for its final season, which
Mm,
I didn't watch, but that sounds interesting. And by the way, if
right.
anybody has a question or wants us to address something, please feel free to put it into the chat. And, Dean and I love to talk, as you all
So wait,
know.
Heidi, the other thing I want to
Yeah.
ask, because you're dropping all this news about annual documentaries. I've noticed a couple other cool comics websites like TCJ and SoulRag
Mm.
uh, publish comics
Yes.
online. Now, I don't know if they're paying anybody or they just recruit or find cool new young cartoonists or old cartoonists, whatever. Do you ever think about publishing comics on the beat?
So, if we do an annual, I'm almost certain it will have a comics component just
Right.
because, I love editing comics and I mean I haven't I do it sporadically. Every once in a while I get a gig, but I mean it's the same thing. It's just like, finding people and saying, "Hey, let's do something together. Let's do a story." And
Hmm.
I mean it's just so much fun. It's just so much fun when you help
I
foster
know.
somebody else's creativity to
Yeah.
be
Agreed.
successful, right? And so yeah, probably, I
Or even a
mean,
Sunday, like the idea of a
yeah,
Sunday,
I mean,
or something.
I admit that one thing, like one of our well, Brandon Schatz, one of our retailer columnists, pointed out that March 23rd will be the third anniversary of the day that Diamond shut down.
Ooh.
And when we had the pencils down and all that, and like so that was, of course, the scariest. Well, it
And that's
seemed
my
like
mother's 80th birthday is on March
yeah,
23rd.
yeah.
Anyway.
So it seemed like, well, happy birthday to Barbara. And
Oh, yeah.
that seemed like the scariest time. And so much upheaval. And I just spent that first year being stuck in my house writing and covering the news and everything that was happening, and all of the upheaval, and learning how to Zoom and learning how to live stream and do all that.
Yep.
And I recently realized that my lifestyle, as it's evolved during this time, does not have a time when I read comics. It doesn't have a time of the day where I'm like, oh, now I'll read some comics. It's like, oh, I have the time of the day where I'll play Marvel Strike Force and when
Right.
I'll play Pokemon Go.
Right.
But I didn't have a comics reading time. And so I have a lot of reading to do. I have a
But are you
lot.
going to do it? Because I feel like I'm in the same boat. Like I used to go to my comic shop, JHU Comics. Uh, Nick Pitora, Ron Hill. It's just a great crew. And but I used to go there weekly, right? And I used to go with the late great Seth Kushner, and
Right. And you went to the one on
well,
near
I went to
Penn
the
State.
one that was across the street from the Empire State Building, and then
Right,
they
right,
moved
right, right,
over to
right.
the east
And now
side, and
it's
now they
literally right up from where I live. It's up on Third
right,
Avenue. Yeah.
exactly. So I mean, and I used to go there weekly, but now I go there maybe once every 3 months, and they do the kindness of like pulling books from me when I ask, and then I buy them in bulk, right? At the time, which is not very fair to them, but they're
No.
they're super kind.
Yeah.
And but even so, I'll bring back the pile, and I'm looking at this pile, and back in the day, I'd be like, oh my God, this is what I'm doing tonight or the next 3 days. But I'll read my saga, or Drew Baker and Phillips, or I mean, I'll buy Fantastic Four till the day I die because that's the first comic I would, whatever. Or a graphic novel here and there. But it takes a lot longer for me, and I don't know. Are we living in a world where this is just taken over? And when I say this, I mean not even the static web comics that I did on Webtoon, but the fact that there's always moving pictures and sound constantly is consuming us. And then there's the news,
Well, it's funny because that's absolutely part of it. I think it's just
and so much great television. Like I'll
yeah.
never watch
Well,
all the good stuff.
TV is very difficult for me to get into. The only thing I like watching is sports. I like watching the Mets.
Mm.
I'm a very immediate person. I like to, I like the fact that now, that's just how I.
So let me ask you, because that's an
Yeah.
interesting thing. I think I've thought about this. People who are into sports, like my mom and you and other friends of mine, I wonder if they're less interested in a beginning, middle, end of a narrative, and what they want is those points. That the target of the story is to get a goal or a basket
Well, I
or.
well, I think it's more the surprise factor that anything can happen. And
Mhm.
over the last summer, I went and spent 2 weeks with my parents in Maine, and they are very, very, very isolated because they're elderly and they have health issues. And the pandemic has been brutal on the elderly. And I would say it's been very rough on my parents just in terms of not, you need to see people. So they just spent all their time watching Columbo reruns or the Rockford Files, which they've seen a million times. And
Right.
so I was like, come on, we're watching the Mets. And they both, my mom is who got me into being a baseball fan and into
Oh, okay.
comics and into
Right.
computers. She's like a real,
Right.
maven. And Philip is also a baseball fan. So I got them watching the games, and you know what? They loved it. They loved the
Mm.
fact that they didn't know what was going to
They
happen.
didn't know, because another thing that happens, Heidi, we're old enough that we can often see where the story is going to
I
turn
could
and see
I could
the
see where the
ending, right?
story's going within 5 minutes of this thing
Right?
start. I can see it. I know where the story's going to go when I read the synopsis on TV Guide.
Exactly. Exactly. Right.
Most of the time. So,
Right. So I think
yeah.
because we're veterans of narrative, maybe that is why the X factor of sports is more appealing in some
Yeah,
ways,
yeah.
you know?
For me, that's absolutely it. There's no way of knowing what's going to happen. There's always surprises. And, I like baseball. I don't watch other sports, but I like baseball because there's a real human element to it. It's
Hmm.
real, you get to see the people up close and really see
Hmm.
their faces and see their emotions and as they play the
Hmm.
game. So I like that. I have a question from Jen. How would you describe COVID Cop in terms of genre?
Uh, uh, okay. I mean, in fact, it's a romance comic, but it
Isn't everything you do a romance,
that's what
Dean?
I'm saying. Like hello, like duh, right? Like it doesn't matter unless there's some kind of like star-crossed love or something happening. Um, but I think it's basically science fiction comic, but not leaning too hard on the science, if you know what I mean. Like,
Mm.
and it's definitely not. I've never been too political in my comics. I've been more social, I think. I think that there is a couple of comments made in some of the sound effects when you read the comic, and I'll show it to you and you'll know what I mean, that may kind of speak to where I stand on some of the sides of this. But yeah, I think it's more like a sci-fi, not fantasy, a little bit of a science fiction comic. Maybe throw in a little horror.
Oh, you know
Although I
what? You
laughed
should
at it.
call it urban science fantasy.
Urban science fantasy. Is that
Yeah.
a good
Well,
is that
urban fantasy is a genre. So I'm
okay.
sure urban science
Well, there it
fantasy is
is.
a
You
genre.
you
Yeah.
called it. You called it. All
Well,
right. Urban
you know.
fantasy.
So Dean, let me ask you, seeing as romance is part of all your books,
Mhm.
have you seen Wakanda Forever?
I have.
Okay. So when I'm sitting there watching this movie, with Namor and Queen Ramonda and Shuri and everybody, and I'm just like, how they not smash? I mean, come on. And then
Right?
right, and then at the end, it's like, oh, there's a baby. I wonder how it got there.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Like, oh, because I mean, I'm kidding, but it's just like,
I
obviously
know.
the MCU does not show any kind of
It's bizarre.
nick because it'll be banned in China, or it'll be
Is
banned by
that why?
Disney, or it'll be
Oh,
banned in, or certain countries that don't allow any physical contact. But I mean, it's like I just, I don't know, whenever I watch like Thor Ragnarok, there was like a little otherwise perfect movie, and I'm not saying we had to have rampant 70s
no.
style
Right,
sex
right,
scenes or anything,
right.
but it's just they made a baby.
Yeah.
Something
Yeah.
happened. There was a love.
Right.
It's
I,
like
I
people
I
were
know.
like a
And
twinkle in their eye. They had a twinkle in their eye. And
right.
I same one thing with Ant-Man and the Wasp. It's like,
I,
Janet says, did you see that one?
and the new one I have not seen,
Oh,
Quantum Mania.
well,
I
it's not
will.
worth seeing, so I'll spoil it for you.
Oh shit.
It's like Janet's stuck in the quantum realm for 30 years. So she's like, oh, I saw Bill Murray and, I had needs. It's like, Jonathan Majors was sitting right there. I mean, come
Right,
on, let's
right,
be
right, right.
real.
No,
No,
you're
that,
you and you're absolutely right. And I'll tell you this: if the first wave of the MCU was more like a 60s kind of Kirby Ditko Lee Marvel. And then in the 70s, you remember Jim Starlin
mm,
and all the other guys were smoking pot and doing drugs, and then it veered and became kind of psychedelic, right? Which is where we're in a weird psychedelic phase right now with multiverses and so many, you know. Um, I think maybe we might enter the sex phase, and maybe that's what Reed
we'll see.
Richards
This
and Sue Storm are going to be doing. I
maybe,
don't
I
know.
mean, it doesn't have to be sex. I'm just saying romance. Like, just when you're
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
hey, who's that?
yeah. I
You know?
agree. I no, that is what's missing a
Like,
lot from those, and that's my job to try to course correct that in our indie Kickstarter comics. Like
yeah.
that's what you come to Kickstarter for. All right,
Yeah,
that's what we're
there you
doing
go.
at
You come
Kickstarter.
there for
And
the
actually, can
you
I
come for
say
the
something?
comics, you stay for the romance.
You stay for the romance, but I will say this: like one thing I have learned is, and it's kind of like a no duh kind of moment or eureka thing. Is like I saw a Kickstarter for it was $3,000 for like this kind of sex ghost comic. I forget the name of it right now, like Betty Boo or something, right? Like,
Yes. See, now
and it
that
was
sounds disgusting.
it's horrible, but it raised $128,000 because why? It's got nudity, it's got
Oh,
romance,
well,
it's got
yeah.
sex, and I'm like, you know what? I've avoided it all my life because I've circumvented. I've gone around drawing any kind of porn necessarily, and I'm like, you know what? I'm old enough. I think I might start doing some comics that actually has candid sex in it, for narrative purposes, of course, but I think that I might do a little better if I had more of that.
Well,
Again, we have a
yeah,
different economy here, different ecosystem.
there
Okay.
is. And I mean, there's a lot of apparently fetish comics that are really
Mhm.
big on crowdfunding. And I don't know anything about that other than what I just said, for real.
Right.
I do
Of
not
course.
want to know any more than I just said
Mhm.
about this. Hands,
Right.
well, ixnay, ixnay. I'm right back to Wakanda forever with that.
That's right. But he
So,
just has magic babies, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
where
okay,
babies suddenly appear.
yeah.
And so
But
yeah,
anyway,
but there is
I am trying to like do a little investigative kind of, well, what does well here? Because as an artist, I'm trying to just do my art, but I have to think about, I have to put a business hat on, and I was in a car with a friend, right? About a year or so ago, and I was like, you know what Jack Kirby did? He read the news, he had kids and a family, he figured out what can sell next week, right? And he wasn't sitting there thinking about his art, and he was very creative, obviously, right? But he was trying to put ideas together that you would respond to now and want to pick that up, whether it was that image, that title, that conceit, right?
right,
And I need to
right.
do a little bit more of that in my work. Is
Yeah,
what are people responding to? Pay attention to the tea leaves.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, we are surrounded by this information, gush of information. And I do think like finding things that help us navigate it, like Glass Onion. I will say that movie obviously touched a nerve with a lot of people. And
But also what Glass Onion did, I
and
think.
The Last of Us too. I'm still in the middle of that.
I
But
just watched
obviously,
the first episode last
yeah.
night, and it's great.
Oh yeah, yeah. Or
And I finally saw the Banshees of Inisherin, or
oh,
Inisherin or whatever. Oh
what'd you
my
think
God,
of
when did I
that?
write that movie?
My
I'm like trying to figure out when I wrote that. I don't
that
remember.
movie
Don't
is
spoil.
so
Don't spoil,
no,
please.
it's so good. But I always say be in a good mood when you watch it because it is relatable and dark.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So I think we're going to run out of time here.
All right,
And
good. Good.
so we haven't, how can we support COVID Cop?
Oh, thank you. So basically, you can just go to Kickstarter, type in COVID Cop. No one else is doing that. Or type in my name. It's my first Kickstarter, and it'll lead you right to that. And it's a pretty easy campaign to navigate. And there's something for everyone. And yeah, support art, support artists. This doesn't have Marvel or DC backing me. There's no Hollywood thing yet. Maybe someday, who knows. But
Well,
it's
yeah.
right now, it's a comic book in print that I won't be putting on online. What you've shown here is mostly what people have seen,
Mhm.
and that's about it. And that's a whole other conversation about the AI, artificial
Well, we
intelligence,
haven't
piracy
even,
stuff.
like this is our first happy hour, and I do
Right.
think you were the perfect guest to kick it off because
Thank
we
you.
could chatter away for an hour easily, and
Yep.
but I'm sure we'll have you back as we continue
I'm
this
here.
series of what I hope is an ongoing series of conversations with people about comics. And so, Dean, just real quick though, anything else after this? After you ship out your copies of COVID
Oh,
Cop, any idea what the next thing on the horizon is?
I am thinking about returning to Billy Dogma and doing maybe a Kickstarter with a Billy Dogma story and maybe a collection of short stories. I've already plotted out another COVID Cop story and even a third one if this does well enough. Yeah, I do. I would like to lean into self-publishing here and seeing if this works out. I don't know how many times you can go and ask for people to crowdfund you, but I'll find out. And also I'm writing screenplays and plays. I want to make a couple of more short films, and I want to make stories.
Hmm.
So we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, there's a lot more to come. But that's my other podcast, but it's still the best tagline possible. Well, again, I want to thank our patrons who came and hung out with us today. This will be an ongoing feature, not every week, but maybe every other week. And let us know if you're watching this on YouTube. Let us know who you'd like to see here on Comics Beat Happy Hour. Let me see what other guests. I have a big Rolodex, and you never know who I can get. You might be surprised. So, it's going to continue. And Dean, I'll see you on the streets of Brooklyn.
I'll see you at Mocha probably,
Oh
right?
yeah,
In a
I'll
week
see
or
you in a couple
so.
of weeks.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Everybody
All
go to
right,
Mocha.
Heidi.
Thank you again.
Thank
Uh,
you.
take care. Until next time. Comics